Well, this is Pure 24/7 Radio, and it is game time for movie reviews with Andy Godfrey, and I'm joined by Andy right now. Hello, Andy.
Hey Nathan, good to see you and great to be with you. Thanks for having me on the air again.
Yes, it is an absolute privilege, I must say. Great to hear about the latest movies, and this is only our second one of 2025, but I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, already the year seems to be going quite quickly. We've already had one big award ceremony. We've got a number of
Yeah.
award ceremonies coming up, and I've been to the cinema 5 times so far this year.
Wow.
I've got a couple of press screenings coming up, Nathan, which will be really good because we'll be able to review films in advance.
Oh, cool.
Because there are some films coming out today that I haven't seen yet, but we will mention them towards the end, if you like, of the segment so that we can just tell people what's out there, if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. Well, as I've only seen 2 films this week and they're both in the top 10, what I thought we could do this week, by way of something a little bit different, is to do a countdown of the box office top 10. How does that sound?
That sounds fantastic.
So we'll go through the top 10 and we'll remind people of what's in the top 10, what's out there. And there are 2 new films to review within the top 10 that I've seen this week. Shall we go
So,
for it?
yeah, box office countdown.
Box office countdown. We've had some space rockets launched this week, haven't we? So we'll do our 10 to 1. Okay. So at 10, we start at 10.
Yeah.
By the way, Paddington's at 11. We'll start at 10. At 10 is a film called Maria. Now, this is one of the new films that I saw this week. Stars Angelina Jolie, and she plays the famous opera singer Maria Callas. Now, don't know about you guys. I'm not into opera. I've never been to an opera in my life. I've never sat through an opera. There are some songs from operas that I know, that I quite like as individual songs, but I've never been into opera. And Angelina Jolie plays this famous opera singer, Maria Callas, who died in Paris in 1977. And the film really focuses in on the last week of her life and looks back on her life. She's kind of reflecting on her life as we build towards her death. And basically, she was incredibly famous. She was incredibly rich. She mixed with the rich and famous. She married a Greek millionaire who was at the time was the richest man in the world. So she had this incredible lifestyle. But the film really shows us how desperately unhappy she was. And part of that was because she didn't like the fact that she was getting older and that her voice was going and that she couldn't all the way through the film during the last week of her life. We see her listening to recordings of herself when she was younger and trying to recapture those and being unable to do so. So it's a really, I'm not into opera, but I found it a really fascinating character study. And what's interesting is when they cast Angelina Jolie in this role, the director said to her, "Can you sing?" And she said, "Well, a bit." And it turns out she could sing. But what they've done is they've melded her voice with Maria Callas's actual voice. So sometimes you're hearing Angelina Jolie and sometimes you're hearing Maria Callas, but you don't know which is which when you're watching the film. And it rather reminded me, I'm sure you know the famous film My Fair Lady. Audrey Hepburn starred in that film. Audrey Hepburn couldn't sing. Audrey Hepburn couldn't sing. So they brought in a lady called Marni Nixon, who, of every Hollywood person ever, this is the one person I feel most sorry for. This lady, Marni Nixon, was brilliant at imitating other people's voices. And she could imitate, she could sing, but she could make it sound like Audrey Hepburn was singing. She was very clever, very talented. She did the same thing for Deborah Kerr in the film The King and I. And so in My Fair Lady, Audrey Hepburn sings the first 2 lines of every song. And then it's this girl, Marni Nixon, takes over. Marni Nixon was not credited. She got no credit for years. Her name did not appear on the credits of the film. And nobody knew anywise because they didn't want people to know that it wasn't Audrey Hepburn singing. And I feel so sorry for this girl because her name is barely known. And yet she was actually the real talent. But with Maria, Angelina Jolie does a lot of the opera singing and then kind of melds into the original recordings. It's a really interesting character study of a rich woman growing older, losing her talent, losing the thing that made her famous, trying to recapture it, and passing away in sort of obscurity, really. And I found it a really moving, touching film. I really enjoyed it, and I thought that it was something that was worth seeing because I found out about this person's life. Okay, by total contrast, at number 9 is Better Man, which you remember we talked about, I think, on the first show of the year, when which is the Robbie Williams story, and Robbie Williams is played by a chimp. Now, Robbie Williams, of course, is still with us, and this film, which really they looked at Rocket Man and said, let's remake Rocket Man, but just tell it in with a Robbie Williams story. Lots of good music, lots of great pop songs, lots of singing and dancing. One scene that's lifted out of Battle for Planet of the Apes because Robbie Williams has got multiple personalities and his personalities are all battling for control. And he, as I say, he's portrayed as a chimp. It's a really I didn't think it was great, but again, an interesting look at somebody's life. So this is very much, as we said, the Hollywood trend at the moment is to make movies about real people. They don't seem to be coming up with too much that's original at the moment. And in fact, we'll see this when we get to the end of this segment with the film that's coming out today. But the Robbie Williams story is at number 9. At number 8, still hanging in the top 10, is Moana 2. Now, this came out in November and is now available on Disney Plus, but it's still hanging on in there. So Moana meets a demigod called Dwayne The Rock Johnson, who she met in the first film. They team up to find a mystical island where that will lead them to other islands and people of their own race where everybody can join together. Very unmemorable songs, lots of good action, some slapstick comedy that's quite fun, but not great. But Moana 2 is at number 8, still hanging on in there. And really, it's just amazing that 7 weeks in the charts, with it now on Disney Plus, it's still doing quite well. So, you know, Disney have still got this magic formula that seems to attract people. At number 7, still hanging on in there after 8 weeks in the charts, is, of course, Wicked. Now, as we've said before, the title refers to how the Wicked Witch became the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz, but it also refers to something wicked that's happening in Oz that needs to be put right. My daughter went to the sing-along version of this, so some cinemas are showing sing-along with the lyrics on the screen. She said, Dad, it was really great to see people enjoying themselves singing along with the songs. It is now available to watch at home. Wicked, I think it probably will lose a little of its impact because it's a big, spectacular film with big, spectacular sets. Might lose a little bit of its impact on TV, but it's incredibly popular. It's been nominated, it won some Golden Globes the other week. The Golden Globes are voted for by the American press. So American press critics are the people who vote for the Golden Globes. They gave Wicked some awards. It's been nominated for BAFTAs. It's been nominated for Oscars. I think it will do well, but it is now available to watch at home if anybody hasn't seen Wicked, which is the thing everybody's talking about. And of course, if like me, you've seen the stage show, you know what's happening in part 2. You know what's coming. And I had fun watching part 1, trying to put together all the clues, everybody in place ready for part 2. But Wicked is still in there at number 7. Number 6 is a film called A Real Pain. Now, we talked about this last week. This is 2 mismatched American Jewish cousins on a tour around Poland looking for Granny's house, looking for the house that Granny grew up in. Now, obviously, the Jewish folk, particularly in the Second World War in Poland, well, they had the most atrocious time imaginable. Poland was home to Auschwitz and several other concentration camps. And although this film is a bit of a comedy, although this film is a bit lighthearted, there is a scene set in a concentration camp where they go to visit, and that kind of brings everything down to a sort of more realistic level. It's a really good film. The 2 central leads are superb. It's written and directed by Jesse Eisenberg, who also stars in it. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I spent a lot of time in Poland when I was a missionary. I've had the fortune of traveling all over Poland, literally from north to south and east to west. So it brought back many great memories for me of what is a beautiful country. So I really enjoyed it. It's called A Real Pain. It's nothing much happens. I mean, literally nothing much happens. 2 cousins just on a train with a group of other people traveling around Poland, looking at the sights. Not a lot happens, but it's moving, it's touching, it's funny, it's thought-provoking. It makes you think about the value of family. And it makes you think about the value of your heritage. What is your heritage? What is my heritage? What turned us into the people that we are? What made us the people that we are? And so it's a really interesting film, and I really enjoyed it. And it's called A Real Pain. Number 5 in the chart. I am a huge Nicole Kidman fan. She's made a couple of duff films. Okay, she made a film called Grace and Monaco, which was terrible, and she was terrible in it. She made a film that was a remake of the classic The Stepford Wives. It was terrible. Okay, but generally speaking, I love Nicole Kidman's films. She made a great film called The Others, which was a ghost story. She was in Moulin Rouge. She's been in some great films with Tom Cruise. This is one of those films that counts as terrible. This is one of those films that, Nicole, why did you do this? I mean, come on, Nicole, you are better than this, because this is boring rubbish. I want to skip over it really, just to say to people, if you're tempted to go and see it, it's an 18 certificate film in which two people engage in a lot of adult behavior, so we say, for the entire length of the film. It is boring beyond belief, let alone anything else, being a little bit offensive, but it is boring beyond belief. So we'll skip over that. Number 5. Number 4, We Live in Time. We Live in Time. We reviewed this on the show as well. This is a romantic love story where a young man is run over by a young lady. She takes him to hospital. The two of them end up falling in love. She ends up getting cancer. My only problem with this was it felt like they were throwing everything at it but the kitchen sink, and I'm sure I spotted a kitchen sink in there somewhere. Let's give this girl cancer. Let's say she can't have a child, and then let's give her a child, and then let's do this and let's do that, and let's have them fall in love and fall out of love, and let's have them argue and reconcile, and It's like every single thing conceivable in a relationship we will put into this film, which is under 2 hours long. It was a little bit too much. For me, it was a little bit too long. It's a really good story. The characters are really likable. But for me, it was too long and too much. But it's a romantic drama. If you're into that sort of thing, you're going to love it. That's at number 4. Number 3. It's the other film I saw this week. Now, I have been in trouble this week, okay? So I help run a Facebook page called the Mark Kermode Appreciation Society. We've got 6,000 members. Mark Kermode is the leading film critic in this country. I'm also proud to say he's a friend of mine. And you'll often see him on the BBC, and he does podcasts and so on. So I posted a review of Sonic the Hedgehog 3. And I said, it was a bit lame. And you would not believe how many people responded in the comment section. I was saying, Andy, you're wrong. You are so wrong. One chap said, Andy, I took my 11-year-old grandson to see this, and he absolutely loved it. That's because it's a film for the kids, and I'm a 62-year-old grumpy old man. So I didn't particularly enjoy Sonic the Hedgehog 3. It's got a great cast. Stars Jim Carrey, Keanu Reeves, Idris Elba, you name it, they're in it. Basically, Sonic the Hedgehog, a game I've never played, and lots of our listeners will know the game, but I've never played it. So Sonic the Hedgehog is this creature from another planet who's crash landed on Earth in the first film, had some adventures, made some enemies through 1 and 2, films 1 and 2. We now discover that there's another Sonic Hedgehog on Earth, and he's been on Earth for 50 years, but he's a baddie, and he wants revenge on the government agencies that captured him and tortured him and held him captive for many, many years. And he teams up with one of Sonic's enemies from the first 2 films, played by Jim Carrey, and they intend to destroy the Earth. They launch, it turns out, under the River Thames, just the other side of London, of Tower Bridge, there's a huge spaceship that's been constructed, and they get control of this spaceship. They launch it into orbit, and from here they're going to destroy the Earth. Can Sonic save the day? I think we all know the answer to that question because we're all sat here and the Earth hasn't been destroyed. I thought it was lame, but kids are loving it. And it's number 3 in the box office chart. And it's been out since before Christmas. It came out before Christmas. And it's number 3 in the charts. As I say, I didn't really get too much pleasure out of it. There's a few interesting jokes. There's references to films that were made in the 80s and 90s, one of them being The Green Lantern, that I know that I can't imagine kids have even heard of. There's even a reference to Popeye, and I think a lot of kids will struggle to say, well, who's Popeye? But despite that, kids apparently are loving it. I thought the CGI was very dodgy, not great, but kids are lapping it up. It's number 3 in the box office chart. So what do I know? I mean, I'm a 62-year-old grumpy old man who thought it was okay, but didn't really enjoy it. But kids are loving it. So again, seriously, it would be a recommendation if you want to take kids to the cinema this weekend. If you want to get out the house, get the kids out of the house, take them to the cinema to see Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Kids will love it. You will sit there as an adult bored stiff, I'm pretty sure, but your kids will have a great time. So that's number 3. Number 2 in the box office top 10 is a film I haven't seen. The only one in the top 10 I haven't seen, called Nosferatu. Now, Nosferatu was a film that was originally made in the 1930s. It's a black and white vampire movie. It's a film that was based on the book Dracula. In fact, there were copyright issues because back in the 30s, the people who held the copyright to Dracula claimed that the makers of the film Nosferatu had stolen their ideas and basically remade their book, and there was a whole copyright issue. So what they did was, instead of setting it in Transylvania, they set it in Germany, and they said basically it's a different story. No, it's not. It's the same story as Dracula, but we've just set it in Germany to avoid copyright issues rather than setting it in Romania. I haven't seen it, so I'm not going to comment on it. Vampire films, not for me. They just, I just won't go and see a vampire movie. Number one. It's one that we haven't mentioned, and we have reviewed it. And I still can't believe this. And I was stunned when I got my phone out yesterday and Googled, the top 10, box office top 10. I couldn't believe this is number 1. Number 1 in the box office top 10 is Mufasa, The Lion King. Now, bear in mind, Nathan, this is a live action Disney film. The live action remake of The Lion King flopped. I mean, it did no business at all. And so many of us were stunned to the core when Disney announced that they were sending out another live action Lion. Why are you doing this? Your first live action Lion King flopped. It didn't make any money. Why are you doing this? This one, which has been out now for 4 weeks, is number 1 in the UK box office top 10. Now, having said that, I actually think this is a really good. This is 50% a good film. The story's really good. It's a musical, and the problem is the songs, because lions still can't dance, and lions still can't talk, and lions still can't sing. They haven't solved the problem of making lions look like they're actually talking in a realistic, or singing and dancing in a realistic manner. And the songs are terrible. I mean, the songs are by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who wrote Hamilton, and who wrote the songs, for example, for Mary Poppins Returns, which was fantastic. I mean, he's a great songwriter, and anyone who knows Hamilton will know that that's a sort of rap musical, and it's just, I love Hamilton. But the songs in this are boring. The songs in this are not memorable. I didn't come out humming one tune. When I went to see the original Lion King, the animated film, I came out going, Hakuna Matata and the rest of it. All the other great songs by Elton John and Tim Rice. Lin-Manuel Miranda's having an off day with this. The songs are terrible. The animation's terrible. But the story is really good. And I am convinced that's what's keeping it at number 1. People are still going to see it. And again, it's still the Disney magic. So in fact, Disney, because A Real Pain is a Disney film, Disney got 3 films in the top 10. There was a time a few years back when we thought Disney's star was waning. When you wish upon a star, and Disney were wishing upon a star and their wishes won't come true. They were sort of producing average films at best. Suddenly, Disney's back with a bang. Really is. And Moana 2 and A Real Pain and Mufasa the Lion King, all in the top 10 after having been out for a couple of weeks. really, really good news for Disney and for Disney fans. So that's the top 10, Nathan.
Wow.
And as I said, there's lots of films we've talked about before. But the two that I saw this week, Maria, if you like opera, if you like learning about the lives of the rich and famous, go see it. You'll enjoy it. If you like comic book games, if you're into gaming and Sonic the Hedgehog, take the kids. You won't enjoy it. Well, you might, but take the kids and they will certainly enjoy it. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's the
Excellent.
top 10.
Yeah, some good films there. And I see what you mean about Sonic the Hedgehog. I think, seen parts of the first two
Right.
prequels, and I think I thought similar to you actually. I mean, they seem pretty good, pretty funny, but again, not necessarily quite as compelling as they could
No,
be for an adult
that's
audience.
right. As I said, I've never played the game, so I don't have a clue. Obviously, they've lifted scenes from the game. There's something about a magical crystal that he has to go and find, which obviously is part of I would guess, part of an object of the game. People who've played the game can write in and tell us. Um, and as I say, I got lambasted for posting a negative review because everybody came back and said the kids are really enjoying it. You know, so it was just something that I just sat through because I thought, well, I'm duty bound. I ought to go and see this. I might even enjoy it. I go into every single film hoping that it's going to be a classic because what's the point of not? You're wasting a couple of hours of your life. So I go into every single film hoping it'll be a classic, and sometimes I come out thinking, oh, like Baby Girl, which is at number 5. I mean, just total waste of time. What are you doing, Nicole? But Sonic the Hedgehog, yeah, I mean, as I say, I'm not the target audience, but the target audience are loving it.
Yeah,
So that's good.
yeah.
And anything that, I mean, I heard this week of a couple of more Cineworlds, one in Nottingham that's closed down. So anything that gets people back into cinemas and, we can support cinema and it gets people into cinemas and bottoms on seats is a good thing. And so clearly, yeah, I'm all for it, but it wasn't for me.
Well, that's the thing about films, isn't it? There's we all have our own preferences, our own tastes, and there's such variety out there. So, like you say, people are loving it, and some might not love it, but
Yeah,
that's the
that's
thing, I
right.
think.
I mean, there are 4 films out today. So I'm hoping that this time next week we can talk about these and certainly begin to share, with people some thoughts of these because they will still be in the box office next week. So, of the 4 films that are out today in cinemas, which I hope to see during the week. I won't go and see a vampire movie, but I will go and see a movie about werewolves. So we got a film called Wolfman coming out, which is a new horror film about werewolves, obviously. We've got a new historical action adventure film coming out about William Tell. So we've all heard of William Tell, and we all know the William Tell Overture, which is the theme, I think, to the Lone Ranger. We've also got a really interesting film starring Tom Hanks, in which they've de-aged him, using computer technology. It's called Here, and it's about a plot of land. So imagine that room you're sitting in right now. What was there 10,000 years ago on that exact spot of land? What did that spot of land where you're sitting look like? And this film basically traces the history of a plot of land from almost the creation of the world all the way through to the present day, and all the things that have happened on that plot of land.
Wow.
I mean, it's a really fascinating. I can't wait to see it. It's a really fascinating concept. And I mean, where I'm sitting, what did Milton Keynes look like 10,000 years ago?
Yeah.
Was it a primeval jungle? Was it a barren wilderness? What was it like? And then somebody came along and did cavemen live here in Milton Keynes? And then, on this spot, and then slowly and surely, as times changed, the industrial, what did the spot of land that I'm sitting on right now look like in the Middle Ages? It looked like something. It was here.
Yeah.
And it's not something we ever think about, really. But this is a new film. It stars Tom Hanks. It's called Here, simply called Here, Here, and it's about a plot of land down through the centuries, and the way people have built on it and lived on it and so on. So that looks fascinating. I really look forward to reporting on that. And then the other one that I'm quite looking forward to, but this is what we were saying earlier about a lack of originality in Hollywood at the moment. We have got another biopic, yet another biopic of a rock star or a pop star. It's called A Complete Unknown, and this time it's the biopic of Bob Dylan. So Freddie Mercury, Bohemian Rhapsody, Elton John, Rocket Man, Robbie Williams, Better Man, Whitney Houston, I Want to Dance with Somebody. You know, the list goes on and on and on. We've now got the Bob Dylan story. Now, this stars Timothy Chalamet, who most recently has been in the Dune films. Great actor, absolute great actor. From what I've seen of it, he looks like Bob Dylan. I need to do a little bit more research as to whether he's actually doing his own singing. But I listened. I was doing some work in the office this afternoon, and I put some Bob Dylan music on. And Bob Dylan went through a gospel phase where he released a couple of gospel albums. I think one was called Gospel Train. Well worth digging out Bob Dylan's gospel stuff. Might be worth pure digging out. It's really, really interesting music. And he sings a lot about God and about Jesus, and he's got a song called Is God on Our Side, where he reflects on because Bob Dylan was very much a political activist. You know, he very much spoke out against war and tyranny and what he saw as injustice in the world. And he's got a really fascinating song on an album called The Time. In fact, I've got the album here, The Times They Are A Changing, and I was listening to that this afternoon. And it's a really, really interesting song about Is God on Our Side. So we've got his story coming out. So, you know, that would be fine. For people who want to stay at home this weekend, I'm just going to mention two films, really, because there's a whole host. But I want to mention a classic. Not very often do we talk about classics, do we? I mean, we talked about My Fair Lady earlier, and that reminded me of this. So on the BBC iPlayer at the moment, is an absolute classic, and we did talk about Mary Poppins Returns, but the original Mary Poppins is on, and I just thought, you know what, let's remind people of that. The original Mary Poppins, 1964, Julie Andrews, Dick Van Dyke, with the worst Cockney accent you've ever heard in your life. Mark Kermode reckons that Mary Poppins is the second greatest movie ever made. My daughter once very kindly wrote a review of Mary Poppins, and we gave it to Mark, and he very kindly commented on it. He reviewed Amy's review, which was great and very kind of him. Mary Poppins is such great fun. We forget supercalifragilistic, you know, spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. All those great songs. The special effects are. There's a scene where they're dancing with animated characters, and Dick Van Dyke is dancing with animated penguins. You know what? Mary Poppins is a lovely film. And then when you've watched that, dig out Mary Poppins Returns with Emily Blunt playing Mary Poppins. I don't know if you ever saw it, but Mary Poppins Returns, everybody was dreading it. I mean, I rang Mark Kermode on the day Mary Poppins came out. He'd seen it. And I knew he was dreading it because he thought this is going to ruin the magic that is the original. No, it doesn't. It builds on it beautifully. And I love both the Mary Poppins films, but Mary Poppins is on the BBC iPlayer at the moment. So that's free and available probably to everybody listening. You know, you don't have to pay for Netflix or Amazon to get that. So Mary Poppins, wonderful, wonderful classic movie, just a joy from start to finish. The other one that's out for home viewing now and available to rent is Gladiator 2. Sharks in the Colosseum. We know the Colosseum staged recreations of Roman sea battles, but they did not have sharks. Oh, except according to Ridley Scott, they did. And Gladiator 2, if you've seen Gladiator, you'll want to see this. It's a sequel. Many, many years later, we had to wait about 23 years for the sequel. I mean, watch the original. The original is really good. It's quite bloodthirsty. It is about gladiators in the Colosseum. But I wasn't a big fan of Gladiator 2 when I went to see it just before Christmas. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I did enjoy it, despite the historical inaccuracies. I mean, there are so many. Just forget history. Just enjoy the spectacle. So Gladiator 2 is now available to rent at home. And if you like sword and sorcery and people bashing each other up and sharks swimming around the Colosseum, how did they get them to the Colosseum? I've been to the Colosseum. How did they get these sharks in the Colosseum? I don't have a clue. You know, but it's enjoyable. It's enjoyable. So those are my films of the week, Nathan. Yeah.
Yeah, well, fantastic. Thanks so much, Andy. Loads of great films to watch, and thanks so much for bringing us through the top 10 in the box office at the moment. It's rather surprising to hear about some of those that are still, like you say, hanging on after many weeks.
Yeah, they're just hanging on in there. And it's interesting that a lot of them, like Sonic, like Mufasa, are sort of more Moana too, are more sort of family orientated films. And I hope that this means that people are going back to the cinema, because cinema, like everything else in the economy, has suffered. And we really need, and don't just go to your Cineworld. Check out your local independent cinemas. Often you get really good ticket prices. Often independent cinemas are cheaper than, say, Cineworld or Odeon, and they're worth supporting. I mean, the town where my mum lives in Somerset in Clevedon is got the oldest cinema in the country, still showing movies, and it's been showing, or rather, it holds the Guinness Book of Records for showing movies continually since 1912 or something. They didn't even stop during the Second World War.
Wow.
Go and support your local independent cinema as well, because otherwise people are losing their jobs and things are going out of business. So yeah, it is good. And next week we'll report on Bob Dylan.
Yeah, that sounds like
a
fun.
complete unknown. I don't think so. But we'll see.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Andy. Great to hear from you again. I look forward to speaking again soon.
Thanks, Nathan. God bless you and God bless Pierre.